Okay, so welcome. Today is Tuesday, April 26th, and this is the Kubeflow community meeting. Today we have a really exciting agenda because as we're starting the Kubeflow 1.6 process to develop and deliver 1.6, one of the first things that we have done in our process is to ask the release teams, or excuse me, the working groups to provide an update on their roadmaps. And so we were very lucky today that several of the members of working groups have agreed to provide some updates on their roadmaps. And to start off with that, I believe we're going to start with Janu is going to provide an update on CATIB and the training operator. Janu, can you present, or do you need to present? The floor is yours.
Sure. Hi everyone. I'll be presenting on behalf of training and the Automl working group. So from the training working group in 1.6, we are looking at enhancements for the Elastic training that we have added in the last release. So in the PyTorch Elastic training, we are looking for a better success policy and the failure policies that we have currently. One of the problems that we have is in a TF job or PyTorch job, the job gets failed when one of the pods gets terminated, right? And right now that is kind of resolved in using the Elastic training, but there are some corner cases where that is not handled. So there are enhancements planned for the Elastic training. And the second major feature that we are looking at is Elastic scheduling part using Volcano. Volcano is a gang scheduler which is used by community a lot for scheduling pods, particularly for the ML workloads. So we would like to add support for Volcano for the Elastic training when that is getting started. And we are looking at supporting Kubernetes 1.22 as an official release in 1.6 release. We are also looking at if we can have that in CI for Kubernetes 1.22 cluster, since it is commonly managed by the infra team. And we are always in the process of improving the test coverage for all the operators. So since we have merged a couple of operators to the main training operator, we didn't have enough test coverage, and we are looking at adding that in 1.6. And so currently in training operator, we have MPI operator V1 version. We are looking at options to support V2. So there's a separate proposal for V2 operator future roadmap. And once that is finalized, we will work towards that, supporting MPI operator V2 version in training operator. From the Automl working group, we are looking at having newer algorithms. One is the PBT, population-based training, and it's in draft stage right now, and hopefully that would get merged in Kubeflow 1.6 release. The other major feature that users have asked for is supporting JSON formatted logs for metrics collector. That is tracked in one of the PRs, which actually got merged last week. So now users could actually add logs in JSON format, which will be passed correctly by the metrics collector, the default metrics collector in CATIB. Again, we would like to support 1.22 in this release for Catib as well. There are a couple of UI enhancements planned. So the key idea is to support as much features in UI so that someone, a data scientist who is unaware of the backend, can try and debug as much as possible from the UI itself. So adding separate pages for trials and showing logs in the UI. So we would like to add also like a couple of control enhancements there, particularly for the reconcile semantics. So one of the issues which one of the PRs that got merged was if a trial gets deleted manually by a user right now, the experiment gets stuck without further reconcile. It gets into a irrevocable state. So that is handled properly. It would automatically get recreated in the one of the future reconcile when that happens. And we would like to add more distribution support, kind of log uniform scale, and a couple of extra distribution scales supported by third-party libraries that we use. And one package that we currently use for the multivariate was Optuna, which we would plan to update to 3.0 in this release as well. That's all from my side.
Well, that's quite a bit, and just a complete fantastic set of new functionality. As with all these roadmaps, I'm taking notes because I think some of these items we might want to validate, or at least get even more feedback from the user survey. We may want to put some of these, like use of Volcano and Elastic training, and some of these other things into survey questions that we're working on right now for the community. So thank you very much. Any questions from the community on the training operators or on AutoML Catib? Okay, fantastic, perfect timing to move on to the next working group. I think we had suggested perhaps Paul, you could provide an update from KServe. Would that would that be okay?
Oh yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me start sharing. All right. All right, so hello everyone. I am Paul. I'm with the KServe working group to update you on some of the recent changes to the project and what's in the pipeline. And so I may have talked about this before, but the KServe 0.8 release was released in February. So this is likely the release that will be included with Kubeflow 1.6, unless we can manage to cut the next release before the feature freeze. So to start, Knative 1.0 is now supported and certified for the KServe serverless installation. There are now some SDK changes with some renames as well. And also gRPC is now supported for transformer to predictor communication. And there are also some runtime version updates listed here. You have sklearn and torchserve. You can kind of see them right there, just some version bumps. And so to go over what's new, this release introduces 2 new CRDs, the serving runtime and cluster serving runtime. With the only difference between these two is that one is namespace scoped and the other is cluster scoped, as the names imply. And so a serving runtime defines key information such as container image of the serving runtime and a list of ML frameworks or formats that the runtime supports. So other configuration settings specific to the runtime can be conveyed through environment variables in the container specification. And so you can kind of see a sample cluster serving runtime YAML on the right, which is what you'd be, something like this would be applied to your cluster when you install Kserve, just to kind of give you the default runtimes for you to serve models with. So previously supported frameworks and container images were defined in a config map in the control plane namespace. This would be either the KF serving or now the Kserve namespace. The serving runtime CRD should allow for improved flexibility and extensibility, as you can now define and customize runtimes how you see fit. So as mentioned, some out-of-the-box runtimes are provided with Kserve so that users can continue to use Kserve how they did before without any extra effort on their parts. Next, something that follows on with the introduction of serving runtimes is the introduction of the new model spec. So a common problem that Kserve was having in the past was that the inference service CRD was becoming too bulky with each model serving runtime kind of being an object in the predictor spec. So for example, PyTorch, TensorFlow, sklearn, etc., each coincided with an individual object baked into the spec. And this kind of really inflated the size of the CRD. And so if a user wanted to introduce a new model serving framework for Kserve to support, they'd have to further modify the CRD and subsequently the controller code. So no more of that. The new model spec allows explicitly or specifying an arbitrary model format and optionally a corresponding version. So the Kserve control plane will automatically select and use the serving runtime that supports the given format. So if you remember, each serving runtime maintains a list of supported model formats. If a runtime is found with auto select as true, meaning it's auto selectable for models that don't specify a specific runtime, then it'll match the format specified in the inference service with a compatible serving runtime. So it's kind of like an automatic placement thing going on. Yeah, so previous way, which is the way most people are used to now with the current release of Kubeflow and 0.7 or Kserve with the 0.7 release. Then we have the new way, which is slightly different. Just you specify the model format and a generic model key. So now to give a brief update on model mesh with the 0.8 release. So mostly just integration improvements such as the serving runtime and model spec additions I just mentioned. So model mesh now supports multi-namespace reconciliation, and there are some updates like improved REST inference request support for model mesh. And again, just for people who don't know, model mesh is the, well, I guess you could call it the multi-model serving backend for Kserve, which was open sourced by IBM and still kind of in the integration or unification process. So next, to give an update on Kserve 0.9, which will happen sometime in the coming months, may or may not happen before the 1.6 Kubeflow feature freeze. The major items for this release will be, as mentioned, continued unification between model mesh and the Kserve APIs. A lot more work has already been implemented, especially with the storage API and the status object for inference services. Also, an alpha version of the inference graph will be included, allowing users to chain together multiple inference services to kind of produce a final result or final prediction result. And so to do this, we will introduce a custom resource called the inference graph, where a user can specify a list of nodes which contain inference services and how data should flow through the graph. So the 4 types of nodes, as you can see on the right diagram, there's the single node where you can simply connect 2 inference services in a sequence relationship. Then there's the switch node, where specified conditions are checked to determine which inference service a request should flow to. There's a splitter node that allows users to split traffic to multiple inference services using a weighted distribution. For instance, 50% might go to iService E, or 30% and 70% split between the two inference services. And then lastly, there's the ensemble node, where multiple inference services are used for prediction, and the final scoring results are combined at the end. So yeah, we're kind of excited to finally have this feature. So next we have Web HDFS will be a supported storage type with Kserve, allowing models to be served from the Hadoop file system for those who might be using that. Domain template will be configurable for inference services in raw deployment mode. That's the kind of the URL structure, like namespace dash model name, for instance. MLflow will be supported through the ML server serving runtime, and now in Knative or serverless deployment mode, auto scaling configuration will be able to be done per component. So things like predictors and transformers can scale in different ways. The following, I think, are all model mesh enhancements. We have transformer support with model mesh. Before it was kind of just predictor oriented, but now transformers can be used, or will be able to be used. Then we have a cluster serving runtime support with model mesh. So currently model mesh only supports the namespace scoped serving runtimes and not the cluster serving runtimes. So we just kind of improve parity with Kserve. Then we have Azure Blob Storage support for model mesh. Again, improving parity with Kserve and what Kserve supports. And lastly, we have Intel's OpenVINO, the model mesh serving runtime as an option. And this is useful for Intel optimized models. Yeah, so here are some links: website, GitHub. You can check this out. Actually, this is now Kserve. This is actually recently renamed. The Slack is now #Kserve. And yeah, you can check out our meetings every Wednesday. Next one's tomorrow. So yeah, that's about it. Thanks, guys.
Wow, Paul, that was great. And there was just so much there
Yeah.
that my hand is tired from trying to copy down. That's how I remember things, as I copy it down, and it
I can
helps
link
me.
these slides.
Yeah, the slides, obviously great. You know, there are some, tremendously significant plans for 0.9, and I think that the community really will benefit from many of the things you just reviewed.
Mhm.
So thank you for that. The other thing I noticed was the model format and the customized runtime. I remember seeing some things in the Kserve user survey that talked about how people like to use customized runtime, which kind of surprised me. I don't know if you remember seeing that in the.
Right, yeah.
And I assume that this flexibility that you're adding in kind of helps people build those runtimes more easily or support them. Am I right there? Or?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely the extensibility of this is kind of the major reason, because the user can define their runtime how they see fit by specifying whatever should go inside the runtime container, arguments, environment variables, etc. And so that allows reuse of this. They can deploy this and reuse it multiple times without having to specify it or modify the inference service. You just call this serving runtime. I think in the past, people had to put all of this inside the container spec inside the inference service, but now they can just put it all inside a serving runtime and just use that in their inference service, or set it up so it auto deploys to the specific serving runtime.
Hey, Paul, Shri here. Quick question about inference graph.
Yeah.
Do the inference graph, is the inference graph implementation kind of using Istio and other kind of networking capabilities underneath for the A/B testing, or is it like a whole new implementation specific for kind of models and serving and stuff like that?
I don't believe so. We use there's an orchestrator node. We're introducing another pod, which kind of helps the orchestration of these nodes. I don't believe we use anything for what is TO or
Okay. Awesome.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's still in review. Like we're still reviewing it. Let me see if I can
Okay.
find the PR. Yeah, just to note, we have our release tracker project board, which is the GitHub beta. We're kind
Okay.
of going through.
And this is public, right? I mean, anyone can.
It should be. I check. Yeah, it's public.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll take a look at that.
Paul, one question. So in point-eight release, how do you compare features with the raw deployment mode versus the Knative mode?
In pointed release, how do we compare features?
Yeah. So what like can you talk about the feature parity? Like what are the features which are absent in the raw deployment mode?
So raw
in
deployment
0.8?
mode,
Yeah.
I'm not the most experienced with raw deployment mode, but the support, I think to some degree, well, I'm not sure how much the auto scaling works. I haven't really looked. I think it does have some basic auto scaling configuration. I'm not sure if it can scale to 0 like the serverless deployment. It does support transformers. It does not support explainers. I'm not sure if anyone here uses that feature. But trying to think.
So so can you talk about this domain template once again? Sorry about that.
Sure. So for those who are if you use serverless deployment mode, you have Knative and Knative. You can kind of adjust or configure how the URL of the server or the inference service will look. So let me just kind of open this if I can find the issue. Yeah, so this is the kind of issue. Like for instance, you have name, not namespace, not domain, but sometimes you want name dot namespace dot domain, and so that was kind of one of the issues that came up.
Get it.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
Hey, Paul, I noticed that you have some support for Azure on there, and we've discussed Azure kind of being engaged in the community. If there are contacts that you have, I assume you're building this first, either because someone from Azure or a customer is asking for that, but if you have Azure contacts, we probably need to ping them again. So I just wanted to touch base and see if you had somebody you're working with on that.
So the reason I implemented Azure Blob Storage support and Model Mesh is to kind of keep parity with Kserve. So Kserve does already have, I think we do have a guy who we talked to for kind of keeping the Azure support in line, but I'm not entirely sure who. I just, from my perspective, I was just implementing to kind of support all the model formats that Kserve supports in Model Mesh. And so I haven't personally been talking to anyone.
Okay, understand.
But we can check. I think there's someone that Dan talks to on the Kserve side.
Well, this is quite a great roadmap. Probably need to keep moving to the KFP. Any more questions on the Kserve roadmap?
Thank you, Paul, for the great demo. I have a question about the model spec. As you have shown in one of the slides, the model field has changed, right? Like from sklearn to model.sklearn. Is that a breaking change? or is it backward compatible?
Oh, you're talking about right here. This will continue to work. So
Okay,
there's a webhook kind of transforms this into this automatically. Yeah.
Okay. Will there be any conflict if I specify both sklearn and model?
And this
like
and model, I think it'll complain maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
only have there's a one of check.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay, great. James, I believe you were going to help with the KFP update. Are you prepared?
Sure. So let me present my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is James Liu from Kubeflow Pipelines. For the upcoming Kubeflow 1.6, we are planning to release Kubeflow Pipeline 2.0 alpha or maybe beta, depends on the timeline. The main topic or main theme that we are trying to do in this release is the V2 preview. You might have already heard about us like talking about like V2 or V2 compatible for a long time. And in the coming release, we are planning to include that functionality in a kind of like very early phase, but still we are able to run some pipeline using the V2 model. So what we do in this V2 is to support creating and running pipeline in an Argo agnostic approach. So previously we use Argo workflow to specify a pipeline. Right now we use a pipeline template. So internally, or maybe code-wise, we call it a pipeline spec. There's a link over here, so you can check out more in the Kubeflow pipeline repository. And what is included in this release? So we have a brand new DAG visualization based on this pipeline spec and also the MLMD information. So pipeline spec is like the skeleton of the pipeline, and MLMD carry the status and the artifact information about this pipeline run. We also allow people to customize pipeline root when they create a new run. So pipeline root is like the root folder for you to store your artifact. And then SDK, we are changing the usage of namespace kfp.v2 to kfp. So previously you say, okay, import kfp.v2 and then do something like component or build pipeline. Right now, we are planning to change it to just import KFP. So it will change the default approach to build pipeline from V1 to V2. And then we also support a PIP install from a private PyPI repository. So during the runtime, during the container runtime, we might need to pull Python library from PyPI repository. If you are having private cluster or private network that you cannot reach out to a public repository, or maybe your library is only served in the private repository, this design doc allows you to describe how to run PIP install within this private network. We also have the KFP SDK's CLI redesign. So with this redesigned, we aligned the SDK CLI to be more aligned with the backend API. So previously we say upload pipeline and we submit run, but right now we are using a RESTful approach like create pipeline and create run. So it's more kind of like intuitive to the user about what they are doing to interact with the backend object storage. So yeah, so that is all for the next Q4 pipeline release and our projected roadmap. Is there any questions?
That's really a great review. I had a question, and it may be a little bit strange. So direct DAG stands for what? Direct acyclic graph, is that right?
Yes, direct acyclic graph. Yeah, I'm trying to come up with how to spell it. But yeah, that basically means this is a graph that doesn't have a loop.
Right, and so I thought we talked about adding loops, and I've heard that Kale's adding loops. I don't know if that's in or out of KFP, but I thought KFP also had loops. So is there something I'm missing here? Is there looping capability, and is it still a DAG if it does?
Oh, okay. So we might be talking maybe something different, but the term is the same. Like we have for loop, right? We provide parallel for loop functionality. That's definitely supported. The loop, when we are talking about in the graph theory, is that this is a graph with kind of like the directed edge, right? The edge has direction. So it's pointing from one node to another node. So each node has upstream and downstream. But the downstream will never point to the ancestor of the current node. So if you look at a plane graph, like any kind of graph, that you cannot find a loop which go from one node and then go visit some other node and then come back to the same node. If that makes sense.
So within a node, you could have a loop, but not between nodes.
That makes sense. So if a node has a loop, or maybe we call it like parallel for. Like parallel for is like the terminology in programming. Say, okay, I have index equal to 0, and then I +1, +1, +1, execute them in parallel format, and that is like a subDAG. So there's a DAG inside another DAG, which means that in this subDAG, you will have multiple workflow, which is similar, but with maybe some parameter difference in each iteration. And then we combined all of them into the final result and then output from the subDAG. So in this for loop, it's very similar to MapReduce. So you have a very big chunk of data, you slice it into multiple bucket or multiple shard, and then each shard execute one kind of like small process, small workflow, and then you combine them, you reduce them to one result. So that is how parallel for is described, the definition of it. But when we talk about graph, like graph theory, like there's no kind of like loop in the edge perspective. If does that make sense? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it did, and I appreciate that. And I'm sorry if I got us off track there, but it was helpful for me. I hope it helped other people as well.
Sure thing. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got one question about your new DAG visualization. So my question is that, so in the 1.6, you're going to make the V2 SDK as D4, right? So how about the V1, the old V1? I mean, you can still use the V1 SDK and generate the artifact for the V1, and can they also submit the V1 to the dashboard and run it, and how the visualization work?
Yes, so that's a very good question. So the V1 functionality will be kept for a very long time. We don't know how long, but if you use import KFP doc deprecated, then you will continue use V1 functionality. For the UI, we also make feature flag, which will control the V2 functionality visibility, but the V1 is always enabled. So if you are creating a V1 pipeline that is Argo Workflow YAML format, you can always use the new UI to submit the Argo Workflow YAML, and then it will trigger the backend to run those pipelines, and then you will see the result, but in the old DAG visualization. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see. So so when you switch to I mean when you use the V2, which will be the default in the 1.6, and when you submit that pipeline spec and in the UI, so you are saying that I need to turn on the feature flag to see.
Oh, we will turn it on for you.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, so we will turn it on by default. But if you think, no, I don't want the new feature,
oh, I see. Okay.
or kind of like I feel like something is broken, and then there's a way for you to immediately mitigate, right? Like by going to the kind of like the feature flag page, and then disable that V2 functionality. So it at least give you a fallback solution when you find something is wrong with V2. If that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and also let me quickly show the feature flag to you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
As the KFP UI.
Yes.
Okay, so what I do is in here I type front end underscore features. So there's a feature flag page which is hidden from the navigation, but you can still type the URL to find it. What you can do is to maybe enable it or disable it, and then you click Save Change. Then you can see or hide the V2 features. No matter how, you will still be able to use the V1 features.
Okay, cool.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other question?
James, just to reiterate when the Kubeflow pipeline community or working group meetings are?
I'm sorry, like what was the question for Kubeflow pipeline?
I think the pipelines working group meeting is Wednesday. Is that right? What days are those?
Yeah, so Kubeflow pipeline community meeting happens bi-weekly. Tomorrow we will have this meeting in the morning, I think 8 or 9. Yeah, it depends on your time zone. So it's in the morning for the West Coast, United States. But 2 weeks after that, it will be in the afternoon. So it's like bi-weekly, and then switch between morning and afternoon.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Last chance for questions for Kubeflow pipelines.
Yes, is it already implemented, saving the definition of the pipelines in the MySQL database instead of the MinIO storage?
It's not implemented yet. We are planning for that, but I'm just maybe asking based on like your question. Are you interested in contributing for the MySQL migration, or are you asking us to give a timeline about when we are going to implement it?
At first, I'm more interested in the timeline, because as you know, I'm also working on the other part, the further namespace isolation regarding the execution. So I think it will be a bit too much. My employer won't like it.
Okay, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. It's a community driven, so we are not kind of like requesting or asking anyone to commit to anything, right? So it's basically built on top of our interest. So for timeline, I think currently we are planning for KFP 2.0 beta, but we need to kind of like plan for it. But yeah, but like we will definitely do that before GA, the 2.0, if that makes sense to you. We don't
Okay,
know whether
so
it will be included in the Q4 1.6 or not, but yeah.
okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Julius.
Thank you too.
Okay, I think that's, any more questions? All right, we've got about 15 minutes left. I'd like to see if we could do a quick review of the status of Kubeflow 1.5, .1 and 1.6, because I do not believe that the notebooks or the manifest working groups representatives are here. So we'll schedule them for another day. So thank you for all the roadmap updates. Let's move on to Kubeflow 1.5.1, if that's okay. Amber, I don't think, is Kimonis here?
He is actually on PTO until tomorrow.
Okay. So I don't know if we were making progress on 1.5.1 and the update that we had scheduled there. Does anybody have an update on Kubeflow 1.5.1?
Hey, Josh, Karthik here.
Oh, hey, Kirk. Sorry.
I got super busy with like AWS 1.4 release that we did recently.
Mhm.
I'm on top of this pull request that I've created. I'll have my changes ready for tomorrow's pipeline meeting. I'll try to get this merged in.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
Cool.
Okay. Any questions on Kubeflow 1.5.1 or the pull request that Kartik is working on around I believe it's a cert manager item enhancement?
If you have time, I would maybe ask regarding a general enhancement to the cache server, because currently the cache server does not check whether items on MinIO have been deleted. And I would just like to know whether there's interest in contributing this upstream. We have a solution that checks, is the stuff still on MinIO, and only cache it if it is really there.
Okay. Is this, I see this as a great enhancement. I think that we probably need to run that through Kimonis and the release team on 1.5. Is he aware of that? And do we have a tracking issue for that? And
it's totally fine for 1.6. It's just a general question, because you ask whether there are open questions. And since we are talking about the cache server, which is changed in 1.5.1, I thought I could add something to the cache server in 1.6.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah. Okay. let's keep track of that. And in fact, that leads us into probably a 1.6 discussion. And Anna, I believe you may be available to give an update on 1.6.
Yeah, sure. So the deadline for feedback on the release deadline has passed. It was yesterday, midnight Pacific time. So it hasn't merged yet, but I'm planning to merge that pipeline. So the dates listed on the doc is official now, and the target date for the Kubeflow 1.6 is July 20th. I don't have much more than that for now. So the next deadline coming up is the feature freeze, which is June 1st.
June 1st, okay.
Okay, and Anna, I know that you've been continually helping us with process, and I believe you have this tracking issue, and you have a created a project board too, correct?
Yes.
So folks may want to look at this project here. I think I might be able to click into it. Let's see if it comes up. But this is a nice addition that we're using now, right? And people can see progress here.
That's correct. Yeah, we'll, the release team will be using this board to track all the release related items.
Fantastic. Okay. Any questions on the roadmaps? Any feedback, especially from distribution owners? Is this appropriate? You know, if you, I know this sounds like a long way off. It's right before July 4th and other things may be starting here, but you know, as we look at all the dependencies that are going to be required to do this testing, we're trying to give you all a lot of heads up so you can have your environments ready so you can start to do testing. June 22nd, if I have that correct. So, you know, I think there's two parts here from the distribution teams, or maybe more than that. One of them is, you know, does that time align with you know what you guys will have your test beds ready by? And you know, are there particular test bed dependency requirements around Kubernetes, around Knative and Istio that you may have? I think this would be good for the distribution owners also to feed that back into the development of Kubeflow 1.6. Any distribution owners here? Dominic, I know you're here. Is this time frame line up for you?
Yes, I think this time frame should work. We always struggled with releasing on time with upstream, but we're trying to get better at it. I think this should be all right for us.
Okay. Any other distribution owners here? Janu, does this time frame make sense to you? Knocked him out. Okay. Well, there you have it. There are some. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Ion here. I represent for IBM ICAS. The time frame is good to me.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Yeah, fantastic. And James, from GCP standpoint, does this seem okay with you guys at Google?
Yes, for Google Cloud, this timeline looks good to me. By the way, the docs update probably is a little bit earlier than I expected, because like distribution might also need to update the documentation as well. So yeah, we can discuss the detail later.
Josh, can we also add a note here that if by next week the distribution owners haven't gotten a calendar invite from the release team with these dates, can they like either ping me or the release team so I can get them added? For what if I can't find, you know, a public email address somewhere?
Yeah, that's great. Let's make sure that we get that done. Good follow-up, Amber. Folks, if you can help with that, that would be good.
And for those who aren't aware, we're not only just putting out these dates, we're also going to put them on the calendar so you can add them to your calendar so nobody will miss a milestone date or for the release.
Kartik, on from an AWS standpoint, is this, I know this is kind of catching off guard, but I'm gonna ask you, June 22nd, do you think this kind of works for you?
I believe so. We don't have like a timeline for 1.6, so I can talk to my team. June 22nd looks good to me at least.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Well, thank you.
Cool.
All right. So I think we've kind of worked through this. We do need to update the public roadmap. I made a very simplistic update that said 1.6 will be coming out on July, and kind of pointed everybody into to the working group roadmaps. But that's this PR right here, if we wanted to look at that. We have these potential features and we just went over the roadmap, but so here are some that are also kind of bigger, you know, interesting ones, especially the metadata one and the namespace isolation. I think those are quite interesting. Sometimes when we're publishing the roadmap, it's nice to tout a few top features that we know are going to be there. I feel kind of confident that we're going to have Kubernetes 122 support. But again, I'd like to see the manifest and the notebook working group updates. If there are other features that we potentially want to promote as top features we feel very confident are going to be in 1.6 timeframe, we may want to start to put those on the Kubeflow public roadmap. And that will help us in a couple ways, draw in new users, also get feedback, and also learn how to talk about those new features. So if you have new features that you think are really important that should be promoted, and we feel comfortable they're going to be in 1.6, please add them to the list or just let me know. And then the last part is we are working on the Kubeflow survey. I think we're getting closer. We're hoping to have the survey available to users to start providing input. I was hoping we could do that in the month of May, which means we would start next week. But we're taking comments and we'll see if we can adapt the questions. So I think we're making some progress there. I think that's what we had for today. I know we had some new members. Anybody want to introduce themselves? Okay, I think we'll give you a minute or two back. I really appreciate everybody's time, and I hope this session was very helpful. Have a good week.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.